And I am the North East Mayor, and I'm very pleased to be here at the first conference in 15 years with a Labour government. And I'm particularly pleased to do that as a mayor that represents a huge amount of these coalfield areas, actually, because I'm the daughter of a shipbuilder, not a coal miner. But that you're one or the other in the North East is the honest truth. And from my perspective, we really need an agenda that supports these communities, because ultimately, what we often hear are those words left behind and so on. There's this continual image, this painting of these communities as areas that have been forgotten, and actually quite often in these communities that is how people feel, but they're kept behind. It is a decision. And I think ultimately that's what we've got to resolve, because places like where I'm from, we're incredibly proud of who we are, incredibly proud of our history and our heritage, and incredibly optimistic as people about the future. And so I want to start with a pretty bold statement. If this Labour government, working with a Labour mayor, can't improve lives in coalfields areas, then we've failed. We won't have matched our own moral rhetoric. These are the areas that most need change. They're the areas that will most suffer if we do fail. And right now, in far too many, we see measures that need urgent investment. Thankfully, this Labour government and myself as a Labour mayor and others who represent coalfield areas have got some good hard work to build upon, especially from the Coalfields Regeneration Trust. They will help us to make progress. In the North East, where I'm mayor, the scale of the challenge is very clear to see. And we see the benefit of having an active Coalfield Regeneration Trust. You talked about Hordern, East Durham, places in South East Northumberland. They're some of the most vibrant communities that we have, but there's some that are the most visibly in need of change. And you're active in supporting the startups and putting the investment into the areas where others actually, frankly, refuse to engage. But we're also looking at the social fabric, at rebuilding the community services that once held together these industrial neighbourhoods. And that's the approach that I want to take with you as North East Mayor. Yes, the North East does need new jobs, high-end jobs in new and emerging sectors, but we also need to look at our foundational everyday economy, the local high street and the startups that often stand between a family having a manageable week and having a hellish one. Devolution gives us a lot of the tools that we need to address this, to build on that hard work of others. Myself and other mayors are currently working on the local growth plans, which is the joint approach that we've agreed with government. This is how we'll guide government investment into our regions for the next decade. Now, government, of course, very rightly, is keen on the big ticket items that feed into the national industrial strategy, the offshore wind and the advanced manufacturing that can transform growth and productivity. And that is so very important. We want those things. We want them in our region. Our region has unrivaled access to the North Sea to create these jobs. But in a region like ours, there's no victory in simply just creating those graduate jobs if all we do is widen the divides in the North East. Our growth has got to be inclusive, and that should also be the national aim. And in the North East, that will be completely integral. We've got some of the highest levels of economic inactivity anywhere in the country. 28% of women actually are classed as economically inactive. Now, what we know is that they're not really. They're doing other things. They're caring for somebody at home, or, they're looking after children. And so when somebody says to me, those everyday economy jobs, those are not growth area jobs, I say, look, listen to what the Chancellor's saying, look at the evidence. The fact is, if we don't address this, we will never, ever get our region to grow sustainably. But what does it mean in practice? Well, I think that there are some policies that we can put in place very quickly to help coalfield areas, especially in the former pit villages in Northumberland and County Durham and others that are reflected elsewhere in the country, because I know we're not just here to talk about the North East, although I'll do that all day, every day, wherever I go. And I have to say thank you to the Coalfields Regen Trust, because that day in Hordern and the conversations that I've had with you, both at conference last year and in and around, have really helped to inform some of the work that we're doing in the North East and that we want to do. So one of them is obvious, is buses. We want to bring our buses back under public control so that they can finally be a public service again. Because it's so vital that in former mining villages where there's often deep-rooted poverty and some of the lowest levels of car ownership anywhere in the country, it's so vital that we get people the ability to move around, to access opportunity. People are simply cut off from that opportunity, and the public transport network as it currently stands has actually made that problem worse. We need to stop looking at public transport as just about getting people from A to B and start looking at it as the infrastructure of opportunity. Prolonged cuts and until recently rising fares meant that bus travel has become a less attractive option for too many people. Now, the next thing we need to address is where these people are going to work when they do travel to work. And not every town and village is going to be a centre of industry, although we can try. But a thriving high street with well-paid jobs can really make the difference to some families. So we will launch a High Streets Commission to look at how we use mayoral planning powers and other assets to save and rebuild our high streets in our local areas. And this is where some of the things that we've talked about as the Coalfields Regeneration Trust will come into action. One of the things that you said to me when you were in Horden is, you build these fantastic startup spaces and then you hand them to emerging businesses, the people who have the ingenuity and have the ideas in those coalfield areas, but just kind of get a leg up. They want to work in their own area. They don't necessarily want to travel into the centre of Newcastle or into the centre of Durham, but either the land value is too high or you can't access the finance. And so through this, we want to work with you to look at the models that will help us to do that, help us to deliver that, so that the people in our region can get the benefit that others in other parts of the country are getting as well. I want to ensure that our mayoral investment fund takes that foundational approach just as seriously as we do the digital or the energy sectors that we talk about so much. And then finally, I've already mentioned that level of economic inactivity, particularly affecting women. We have to look at how women in the coalfields are trapped in hardship because they just don't have the childcare that they need to be able to either find work or to increase the amount of work or increase their own income. And so we've become the first area in the country to establish a child poverty reduction unit so that we can identify what are the causes of child poverty, find out what the solutions are and then deliver them. And the first thing that we're going to look at is a Mayor's Childcare Grant. We'll identify where women are falling through the gaps, where families are not able to access affordable childcare, and then we'll support them with that to get back into work or to get back into training. Because too many women in hardship see a job opportunity but have to turn it down because they can't see how they will get through that first month back into work, the transport costs, the food costs, the childcare costs. If we're going to create opportunity, we have to be mindful of that and we have to make the intervention. So I think you probably gathered I'm pretty proud to represent the coalfield areas, pretty proud to represent the North East on a whole, but there are challenges. However, that strong sense of local pride, that feeling that we have in the North East of how much we love our own area, that's what powers these towns and villages. That's what makes us who we are. And just one closing comment that I think it's worth remembering, that local pride is there for a reason. People choose to live in these areas. They often have a generational link to their home. They feel a real connection to it. It is part of who they are. And they don't want these towns to be abandoned, and they don't see any reason why the people at the top should only focus on the cities and the global links. Our job is to back their pride and to revive these towns. And I can't wait to work more with the Trust on this. So thank you for having me, and happy birthday.